Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's clinical trial update on the HERO clinical trial. Right. So we're delighted to be bringing you this clinical trial update from Aardvark Therapeutics. I'm Kathleen Jones, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Prader-Willi Research Foundation Australia. I'm also mum to Chloe, and this is her beautiful smile lighting up your screens this morning. I really want to thank Dr. Tien Lee and Dr. Monsi Jamin from Aardvark Therapeutics, who are joining us this morning to discuss the HERO clinical trial that is currently recruiting in Australia. We're really excited to have this clinical trial coming to Australia. This is the second country in the world that the HERO clinical trial is recruiting in. So this morning, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today across this vast continent of Australia. I'm joining you from the lands of the Turrbal and Jagera people, and I pay my respect to elders, past, present and emerging. And we acknowledge the disparity in healthcare access, and we really look forward to the day when there is healthcare equality. Today is a live Q&A session, so please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A section. You can see I'm just putting my cursor on it now. And after the presentation from Dr. Tien Lee and from Dr. Monsi Jamin, Dr. Diane Webster, our Research Director, will moderate a Q&A. We're here to talk about clinical trials this morning, and clinical trials are a vital link in determining the efficacy and safety of potential treatments for Prader-Willi syndrome. Our children and adults can play a crucial role in this link in the treatment development pathway. And at the same time, clinical trials enable our children and adults to access the latest in potential treatments, which is particularly important where there are no accessible approved medications. Of course, this is currently the case for hyperphagia in Australia. I'm delighted that we're now seeing more clinical trials available to Australians with Prader-Willi syndrome than ever before. And in many ways, this is thanks to our Research Director, Dr. Diane Webster, who has worked hard behind the scenes for years to build the relationships and infrastructure to bring about this change. So Diane, thank you for all your hard work that's resulting in this shift. And I want to thank also our incredible supporters who've worked so hard volunteering and fundraising to bring about this critical change for our loved ones. You really are absolutely vital to enabling our work. Prader-Willi Research Foundation is continuing our work on solving the barriers to accessing clinical trials in Australia. We're currently working on barriers and motivations for families and people with Prader-Willi syndrome. And so next week we'll be launching a family survey, which is about clinical trial awareness, understanding and participation. So please keep an eye out for it in your email inbox and on our social media channels. And our work for Prader-Willi critically relies on the support of our community. As you know, we are a not-for-profit or a for-purpose organisation. The Prader-Willi Giving Day this year is on November 12th, and all donations up to $125,000 will be matched by an incredibly generous donor. Giving Day champions are really critical to the success of our Giving Day campaign, and you can easily sign up to be a champion by emailing info@praderwilli.org.au. We'll get you all set up and you'll be able to really support and drive the success of our Giving Day. Historically, this Giving Day has been so successful and so important to us, and we usually get to our target, which this year is $150,000. In addition to the $125,000 matched. So it's a really important engine for our organisation. Before we jump in, a reminder that the Prader-Willi Research Foundation Australia does not endorse or recommend any specific study. We aim to provide information about Prader-Willi syndrome trials that are recruiting in Australia. We encourage you to use this opportunity to learn from Aardvark Therapeutics themselves, ask lots of questions and consider if this trial is right for you. You can put your questions into the Q&A function and you'll be able to ask, we'll be able to ask the panel then at the end of the presentations. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Lee and Dr. Jamin to start the presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Kathleen. So hi, I'm Dr. Tien Lee. I'm the founder CEO of Aardvark. I'm a medical doctor by training. I'm joined here with my colleague, Dr. Mansi Jamin, the Chief Medical Officer. Maybe a quick intro, Mansi.
Yes, hi everyone. Again, I'm Mansi Jamin. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Aardvark. I'm also a pediatric endocrinologist. And I just want to say thank you so much for having us today and being here to listen about what we're trying to accomplish for the patients that I made a promise to, that I would bring meaningful therapy back to them. So thank you again for having us here.
Great. And I'll just go through the first few slides and I'll turn the rest over to Dr. Jamin. Thanks, Mansi. So next slide, please. So Aardvark's a publicly traded company, and just the usual disclaimers for that slide. And then this one, so Aardvark was established in 2017. Actually, my wife, Jane, who's also a physician, was a co-founder with me, and we started the company, and all the seed capital was just our personal capital. We had 3 rounds of private financing, and then we had a public financing this year. And through that time, we've actually advanced the research in this with this molecule that we're presenting now in phase 3. And it's a unique program that can reduce hunger and also treat metabolic abnormalities, we believe. And the drug is called ARD-101. And again, it's an oral drug that is taken by mouth. And right now we have an ongoing phase 3 study, the HERO study in Prader-Willi. HERO stands for Hunger Elimination or Reduction Objective. Next slide, please. So our drug actually has some unique properties. As I mentioned, it's ARD-101. It's taken twice a day, but it actually binds to taste receptors, bitter taste receptors. And taste receptors are actually something that's found not just in your mouth, but all along your intestines, and it's nature's way of protecting you from things it perceives as potential toxins. Our drug is not toxic, but it's given orally, and it's gut restricted, which means when taken by mouth, the majority of the drug stays within the gut. And this is actually very unique in that we believe it really helps with the safety as well as helps with the on-target modality of the drug, which is actually targeting the taste receptors that line your gut. And importantly, it triggers, among many things, a satiety hormone called CCK, which there's many lines of evidence that demonstrate that individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome actually have a deficiency in proper signaling of CCK. Normally, food releases CCK and can shut down hunger, but this pathway is not as robust in Prader-Willi individuals, and I can explain in a subsequent slide. So what we think the manifestations are and what this can potentially address. So the phase 2 findings. So we actually in the course of our development, I mentioned that we started in 2017, and we first tested this in healthy human volunteers extensively after a preclinical animal testing, and then in phase 2 we had a very encouraging set of data in 18 individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome that completed dosing and demonstrated very encouraging signals. And that study was conducted in patients that were 17 years and up. But as we are now in our phase 3, we currently are allowing patients, we started with 13 and up, but we anticipate to lower the age inclusion criteria down to potentially 7 years old eventually, if we're permitted. But we actually have some imminent changes to allow for younger patients to be dosed as well. And again, the primary endpoint of the trial, and we can also talk about it later. I'll defer to Dr. Jamin actually talk about the logistics of this trial. Next slide, please. So really the centerpiece of our strategy for treatment is recognizing that there's a distinction between appetite and hunger in driving eating behavior. So in your brain, there are different motivations that your brain has that drive eating behavior. Appetite is a reward-seeking drive. So if you find ice cream appealing, appetite is drawing you to want to eat that ice cream. Other drugs that are available or approved are able to diminish appetite, so it can make your brain less inclined to like the ice cream, so it doesn't want to eat the ice cream. But the other side of the coin is hunger. Hunger is a sensation you have when you've fasted or skipped a meal, and it's something that is a negative sensation that you try to alleviate with eating. And both of these coexist at the same time. And then when you eat food, normally your body has a number of reactions that give you satiety for both appetite and hunger. And we believe for many reasons that in Prader-Willi syndrome, the main driver is hunger and not appetite. Because individuals with hyperphagia and Prader-Willi, they're not motivated because they find the food particularly appealing or delicious. They're just trying to sate this really incredible hunger that they're feeling. And one of the indicators of this is the other hormone, ghrelin, hunger hormone, ghrelin. It's generally very proportional to your own perception of hunger. So if you were to skip a meal or two, your ghrelin could go up 10, 20, 30, 40%, and you'd feel really uncomfortable with this sensation. But in Prader-Willi syndrome, the ghrelin is actually quite elevated. In fact, 4 times normal levels are not atypical. So it's really representative of this incredible hunger drive many individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome must be feeling. And due to the fact that our agent is amplifying this gut-released CCK and mediating that hunger, we thought that it was very sensible that this would be the right therapeutic approach in Prader-Willi. Next slide, please. And more than that, one of the really big drivers for our confidence and enthusiasm going after Prader-Willi syndrome with our particular therapy is that we're enhancing gut-brain signaling through the vagus nerve ultimately. And we think that this has a lot of other particular features, including tuning down anxiety, normalizing constipation, facilitating body composition with more lean body mass, and also decreasing inflammation. And we think it's more than coincidental in Prader-Willi syndrome that many individuals suffer not just from the hyperphagia, but from anxiety, inflammation, constipation, and also generally a tendency towards higher body fat percentage, even with the BMIs that correlate with normal individuals. So we think that our intervention may have the potential to actually alleviate this spectrum of conditions, although as a clinical trial, our primary objective for eventual approval is to show reduction of hunger, but we are very optimistic about therapeutic benefits across these domains. Next slide, please. And I think this is Monsi's next set of slides.
All right, thank you, Tien. So as Tien mentioned, that we are very excited about what we've seen, and that includes from our phase 2 clinical trial. Again, just to give you a background, these were patients who were 17 years and older. They were in a 28-day study, and we looked at hunger and changes using the hyperphagia questionnaire that you may be familiar with, HQCT. And what you're seeing on the screen is on the right side, what was the average change from a baseline hyperphagia score. So we saw a little over 8-point difference, which we thought was quite significant, as well as important to inform how we would move forward with this program. Very excited about those changes. Anecdotally, we also had changes that were noted to be even a decrease in anxiety, which we are following in the phase 3 trial, which I'll talk to you about. We also saw early signs of improvement in fat and muscle balance. Again, very important to see, especially in the Prader-Willi population. So excited to follow that along in our phase 3 trial, but this was very reassuring data from our phase 2 that allowed us to know that we needed to move forward. So in terms of things that I always want to share is our safety profile. So safety is a standout point for us because we've had several patients dosed from the studies that Tien also mentioned, including our phase 1 studies, phase 2 studies. We've dosed over 70 and actually almost 90 patients at this point, and that doesn't include our phase 3 so far. And the side effects were mostly mild. They were resolved. There were no known problems with other medications that PWS patients may be on. And we don't anticipate any risk to liver, kidney, or the immune system, things that often come up in questions, but I wanted to point those out specifically as well. Again, very reassuring from a safety standpoint overall thus far. So that brings us to our phase 3 trial design that we're so excited to share with you. Again, a few things that Tian mentioned. So far, we are 13 years and older, but absolutely plan very soon to go even younger. We're anticipating 10 and older in Australia, hopefully soon, but we will release that when that's available. And then eventually 7 years and older. We're looking at hyperphagia changes from baseline to the duration of this study. But one important piece here is we also have an open label extension that lasts for approximately a year. You'll see that at the next slide. We're very, very excited about this because right now in the US, we had FDA alignment to lower the age limit to 10. So that's where we're anticipating to go into Australia with that age limit, hopefully soon. And then in terms of our open label design, here it is. So it's approximately 1 year. So when you think about clinical trials, and I'll just scroll back here. So you have 2 arms here. One arm is active drug treatment. The second arm is placebo. The standard for clinical trials, but this is only a 12-week trial. So during that treatment period, you may get one or the other. But one good thing about this trial being only 12 weeks is that everyone is guaranteed to go on open label extension, which means that everybody in this open label extension will get active ARD-101 study drug, and for that entirety of that year. And so we're really happy to be able to provide that option for everyone who completes that first part of the study. And then I will go right here in terms of outside of hyperphagia, some of the requirements to be in the trial. So PWS with hyperphagia, but 13 years, but of course we're going to lower that, I hope soon. And the one important part of this study is that we want the same caregiver to be at these visits. So you can imagine that it's a questionnaire that we're looking at change over time. And so having the same caregiver be at these visits is important to ensure that we have the same consistency of those responses. And then we've tried to keep this as simple as possible. So I'll share on the next slide what we did to decrease the burden as you participate in a clinical trial. And one thing I also want to say is that if you're on any other investigational treatments, we allow 30-day washout from the last time you took in any investigational treatment to the time you can participate. But everyone is allowed to participate in this trial as long as you have that time frame in between those two. So how do we keep this accessible for all patients and their families? We recognize there's such high burden, not just from the disease itself, but you have a routine every day. And we are trying to limit what we add as you participate in clinical trials. And so something we did was simplify the schedule. We're only 4 clinic visits during the phase 3 study, and the open label has even less overtime. And then 3 telehealth visits. Those are just check-in time points. We also took out fasting. Again, because it's hyperphagia, we recognize that's an increased burden. So we took out fasting, so there's no fasting requirements. You don't have to skip meals. And we wanted to keep the routine as stable as possible. So again, outside of just 4 clinic visits and having the same caregiver, we're trying to minimize that routine change. Another really important thing, given that we have people traveling from all over to the sites, especially in Australia, we wanted to ensure that you had travel and lodging. So also to decrease that burden, because you want to participate, and we want to be able to bring that clinical trial to you as well, no matter where you live. And then again, we wanted to make sure that we heard from the families and the advocacy groups on participation. So we've taken a lot of feedback into account to ensure that we make this trial design as easy and accessible as possible. So this is just a snapshot of where we are globally. So outside of Australia, we are open in the US. And then we plan on being open in Europe very soon as well, and Canada. And I will say that we have 2 active sites. So I will show you the map for Australia. We have 2 active sites that you can go on clinicaltrials.gov, and I'll show you the QR code after this one, where you can find the sites and their contact information. But because 2 are active, we anticipate the 3rd site to be active very soon as well. And active just means open for you to contact them to participate in. And because we're open in the U.S. and we'll be opening up in Europe and Canada very soon, we really recommend, if you're interested, reach out to the sites. They are very excited to also receive you and to help you participate if you are interested at all. So I highly recommend go to this QR code. And if you have questions, you can get some answers from this website, from clinicaltrials.gov. We've put most of the information that I shared today and a little bit more actually on some of the key pieces we're looking at. And then also which sites are open. So it'll say open for recruitment at the bottom of their contact, and then you'll know where to contact them first. And I have to, of course, thank our advocacy groups that we are so lucky to collaborate with. Without you, without them, we wouldn't be able to be where we are and to bring very meaningful therapies to the population that we care so deeply about. So I want to thank you. And I want to thank you all for allowing us to be here today to speak to you and present our study that we find exciting, but also meaningful to bring something back to you. So thank you so much. I will stop here and hopefully we can answer some questions.
Thank you, Mansi and Tian. That's a fantastic presentation. We're very, very excited to unpack a few more details to help our families, I guess, get their heads around, really understand what the trial opportunity here is. Can I start by asking, so you've talked about 4 clinic visits over the 12 weeks. Are they at regular intervals, or are they clustered towards one end or the other?
They're regular intervals. And of course, like at the very beginning, you probably have the most, where you have a screening visit, and then you have like the dosing visit itself, and then it's spread out over 2 towards the end of the study.
Excellent. And in terms of travel, so you've talked about covering the actual travel itself and the lodging. Do we have any information at the moment? Are all sites ready to accept people traveling from interstate yet, or is that a conversation that they need to have with the site itself?
So we've had multiple conversations with all the sites, and I think they are very receptive to bringing patients in, but it all just depends on the age group. And so we'll work closely with the site to help mediate kind of where the patients should go, the families should go.
Yeah. Excellent. And that's, so I guess just to be really clear on that, that's travel from anywhere in Australia, Australia being
Yes,
a fairly big country.
Anywhere in Australia, exactly. Yeah. Anywhere in Australia. We wanted as many sites to be open, but there's always limitations from a regulatory standpoint how quickly we can get sites open. So our solution for that was, why don't we take families to the sites then? Whatever we can do to make it easy to have access to the sites that are open. So that's what we did. And so wherever you are, if you want to participate within Australia, we'll allow that and support the travel and lodging.
Excellent. Love it. We have some questions starting to come in. So we have a question around the main side effects and how they were resolved.
Sure. So I can speak to, let's talk just about the phase 2 and the PWS population specifically. And so in our phase 2 study, and I can just explain if you don't understand kind of grading of adverse events that are reported in clinical trials. So 1 through 4, 4 being where you need the most amount of support, hospitalization, etc. 1 being very mild, resolves. 2 being that you need some intervention, maybe you need a medication, and it resolves. So we actually, in most of our phase 2 study, we only had grade 1, very few grade 2 AEs, which just means that they were very mild and resolved. And in the dose, we had 2 parts to our phase 2. The second part is where we actually had a dose titration to the current dosing that we'll be using in our phase 3. And in that, we only had 3 AEs or side effects that were noted, and they all resolved. And one notable one that we are actually following in our phase 3 is diarrhea. And so we know in this population, there is quite a bit of constipation. So we thought, wow, that's an interesting finding. Why don't we follow this in phase 3? Because this could actually be a good thing. And so let's see if we're improving gut motility in transit. And so that's what we have, actually stool assessment scales that we're using in their phase 3 as well.
Well, that'll be fascinating. It's always nice when a side effect turns out to be a silver lining.
Yes, yes.
Can you perhaps speak, I mean, what can families expect? Like so acknowledging that they are mild side effects, but it's still useful, I think, to understand what that profile might look like. What would be, so in addition to the diarrhea, what would be some examples of some of those milder side effects that you were seeing come through in the phase 2s?
And there wasn't anything that was consistent. And so I think that's almost actually a good thing, because if we knew it was consistent across the board, then we're like, okay, there's a lot of GI side effects because it is gut restricted, gut mediated drug, but it's not. There wasn't anything that I could say, put my hat on, that that you're going to experience this, because there were so few and far in between. But I would say that's an oral drug, so it's not even a side effect. It's more like being cognizant that it's an oral drug and you have to be able to swallow, and can you keep that in? And from that, some people have experienced some nausea, just very briefly, again, resolves. Things like that, I would anticipate. There was one case that we disclosed, was irritability, and that again resolved, but that was temporal and related to something that was happening in this individual's life. But again, it was during our active study period, so we noted it. And as a company, we're very transparent. So these are the things that we saw, and we don't anticipate something. I guess we don't know what we're going to anticipate in phase 3. I just know that we had so few that we really can't comment in large that we're going to see one or the other.
So talking about the phase 2 trial, so the -8, the 8-point drop on the hyperphagia scale, can you, for families who perhaps aren't so familiar with the scale, what's the range of that scale? What's the clinical, how clinically meaningful is an 8-point drop on that hyperphagia scale?
So the hyperphagia scale looks at a few different, like if I had to put subcategories in it, it looks at hyperphagia behavior, it looks at the drive and the motivation behind it, and then it looks at severity of that hyperphagia in different buckets. And so you want to consistently see a drop kind of across all of these buckets in order to see true behavioral change and that hyperphagia that everyone kind of sees and experiences. And so the scale itself, the HQCT9, goes up to 36 points. And what we are seeing, and in the general populations, what I'll speak about is that moderate to severe is when you start seeing kind of the increased burden. Any amount of hyperphagia is a burden, but when you start seeing it really infiltrating and affecting families' lives, it's in that moderate, so like in the 15 plus, 13 plus range. And so in our study, we saw an average of 8 points, meaning that across all of those 3 silos, there was a drop in points. And I would consider it more of this. We've had families say 1 point makes a big difference to us just because they've changed this really severe behavioral pattern. And so when you see 8 and you see multiple silos of this scale change, it actually it shows up in multiple ways. The anxiety's gone, the food-seeking behavior is gone. We had families who weren't locking the refrigerators anymore or barricading the food items in the house anymore because they didn't feel like they needed to. It presents differently in different families, but so it's hard to put on a specific answer for what does 8 points mean, because 1 point could be very significant to your family, but 8 points certainly is.
Excellent, thank you. Are you, just out of curiosity, are you doing the food security questionnaire as well to sit alongside that? Yeah, that'll be an interesting alignment of data. Something I always find quite interesting as we move from a phase 2 to a phase 3 is the impact of the placebo effect. So obviously a phase 2 didn't have the placebo control. And there is often, a drop in hyperphagia scores in the placebo group as well. How is the study managing that?
So I've been speaking the whole time. So let me let Tien answer, and then I can always piggyback on that.
Yeah, so I would say this. If you look historically across studies in the space, in 28 days, the placebo actually hasn't really been that remarkable. I think you see oftentimes like a -2 approximately across other studies. So the fact that we saw this substantial drop in this short period of time, I think was incredibly encouraging to us. I think, I don't want to prime anyone's expectations, but I do think that in itself also is indicative of our strength of conviction about the unlikeliness of placebo having contributed to the magnitude and consistency of responses that we saw in our phase 2.
So going to that point around the consistency, did everyone respond? Is this sort of, I guess, goes to the setting the expectations that not everything works for everyone. That's a basic tenet of the variability of our biology, I guess. What were the indications out of the phase 2 in terms of how likely is this to work for everybody? As people enroll in the trial, should they kind of have that thought in the back of their mind that maybe this one will be the right drug, but maybe not as well?
Yeah, so I mean, it is true that not every drug works for everyone. However, I would say that the vast majority of individuals in our trial actually did see a response, and then and as Mansi mentioned, we had 2 different cohorts, a group of 12 and then a group of 6 that completed dosing. Of the 6 that we actually used the higher dose. Actually comprised of 2 individuals from the original 12 that were actually on the lower end of response, and they actually did better with the higher dose as well too. So that's another point that gives us confidence that we're directionally, fairly assured that we should see a good consistency in response. Also note that the therapeutic benefits conveyed may expand beyond just the hyperphagia. So even in individuals where the HQ-CT wasn't as remarkable as the others, I think there were notations that those families noticed really a remarkable decrease in anxiety or signs of inflammation or other types of aspects that really indicated that the treatment was conveying a benefit, even if it wasn't fully reflected in the HQ-CT, which in totality gives us like a lot of assurance that directionally that we're heading in the right direction. And if you look at across the Prader-Willi landscape, typically trials are done under a longer treatment period. Currently, the HERO trial, we have a 3-month assessment at 12 weeks, and you'll note that in our phase 2 it was only a 28-day period. The reason then is because at the time that our company was less well capitalized, we only had the data that would permit us to dose for 28 days. We didn't restrict it on purpose, but that was only what we were permitted to do. And we think that given a longer period of treatment, the expectation would be even a deepening of response, which is for the treatments that have been potentially promising in this space have shown generally enhanced effect size at 3 months versus 1 month. That's another reason why we're very optimistic about what this trial will demonstrate.
I think it's going to be really interesting, isn't it? The timeframes, the available doses, and as you said, that those multiple endpoints, primary and secondary, kind of digging into the multiple different aspects of the Prader-Willi phenotype will be really quite interesting. Okay. So we have some very specific questions around the trial itself. So one of our parents is asking how frequently are blood tests required, and are the sites able to accommodate children who require sedation for these blood tests?
So those blood tests are required during your in-clinic visit, so 4 scheduled visits, and those are spread out. So screening, baseline, week 4, and then week 8, and the end of study. And one of those can be a telehealth visit as well. So you have a fair bit of a gap in terms of venipuncture and sedation. So that's based on the site itself. They're very well versed, especially the sites that we have that are open on taking labs from this patient population. So they'll work with you to make sure that they can support whatever your needs are.
And are there any secondary medical conditions that might prevent a participant joining the trial?
We actually, I feel in our protocol, we've limited the exclusion. because we wanted to make sure as many could participate. But one thing that we couldn't leave in to be included is type 1 diabetes requiring insulin. But we did take out, previously we had type 2 diabetes that are only on oral medications, but now you can be on insulin. And that was a change we made to really help reflect the full population and not limit who can participate. And so, and then there were also certain antipsychotics we initially had taken out or taken out from the exclusion to allow for those participants to also be able to be in the study. So now you can actually be on multiple as long as it's consistent if it's a chronic medication.
I think that raises a really interesting point too around continued care during a clinical trial. So obviously, as families are working through the process of figuring out if this trial's a good fit for them, that's a conversation they should be having with their clinicians, their whole clinician team. So I'm listening to you talk about, diabetic medications, so you should be talking to your endocrinologist, and antipsychotic medications, so you should be talking to your psychiatrist. You should be having really highly transparent conversations with everyone in your care team about participating in a clinical trial. We do often get a question around that, how does a clinical trial and the care provided by the trial sites overlap with or connect with your usual clinical care team?
So especially if you're traveling, right? If you're coming from a different region to travel for a clinical trial. So that's where the coordinations is really important. And so the sites, I think they take very careful notes based on what say you have a primary care provider somewhere in a different city. And so there's, if they have access to electronic medical records, maybe they don't, but they will ask for certain pieces to ensure they have a full history. And then you will also receive documentation that you're participating in a clinical trial that you take back to your physician so they're aware of what you're on. I think it's really important, especially for the caregivers of those participants, to have these notes provided to the primary care physician of the participant, just so that from day one to full study completion, that the primary care physician actually knows the different medications they're on, that they were in the trial, because you may need to see them while you're in the trial. And so they should be aware of what else you're participating in and kind of what are the other assessments that are happening, because that's also nice to know if they're getting blood work. So you don't have to be redundant. If you're doing it if you're doing it in the study, maybe you can use some of that data that there's available, but or get labs done locally for your PCP and get it done for the study at the site level too. So you just get picked once. That's the coordination that you should kind of be aware of. But that's a great question.
Yeah, excellent. Is there a particular baseline HQCT, so hyperphagia score, that's needed to be eligible to enter the study?
So we don't disclose that, and that's just because we want to really generally see where you stand in the hyperphagia scale. And again, we don't disclose it just because it is a hyperphagia assessment. So there's a baseline level that you must meet. But again, that's based on when you go into the site, they'll take that assessment and then decide where you go. And I'm being a little vague about this for this one reason. It's because we want everyone to have a true answer to their hyperphagia. Because if you enter a clinical trial, you don't have a hyperphagia or you have minimal hyperphagia, it really affects data integrity. And so that's why we don't disclose what that baseline requirement is. We just say that you have to have hyperphagia and it affects your life enough, then take this test and see if you can enroll in this trial.
Actually, it's really, I think, highly relevant to the placebo effect there as well, isn't it?
It is.
If you inflate your hyperphagia score to get in, and then you have this drop, but you're in the placebo group, you can really throw the design out. So
exactly
that piece around data integrity and honest assessment is critical to the quality of the data that comes from a trial, and that quality is what allows a trial to actually be successful. So that's a really critical point. We have a question about other tests that might be required before starting the trial. So I'm going to ask this one a little differently. I think there's two parts to this, right? There's the pre-screening and then there's the baselining. Can you speak a little bit to what testing might be required at each of those points? So pre-screening and baselining.
So, so generally, you will be asked to sign a consent form to allow for these tests to be done. Then you'll have certain tests. So there's a pre-screening that sites may do once you've signed, just to ensure that you actually should go through the screening process. And so, are you qualified? Do you meet some of the criteria, the baseline criteria? Do you have hyperphagia? The participant have hyperphagia, PWS, and age requirement, right? There's like general questions, and then that's like first tier. Then before you actually have labs, which I feel are kind of the where it starts becoming more invasive. And so before you have those labs, they'll kind of confirm that you meet the basic criteria that you likely would move forward unless you have some issues with your lab work. And then the lab work's done at screening. And the screening labs are really important because we do just general labs that like chemistries of your blood to make sure metabolically things are sound. We do A1C just to see where you are in the spectrum of if diabetes and control. And we have a limit of how high your A1C can be, which is 8.5 for us, milligrams per deciliter. So we'll check those things. And those are just important because they're safety labs. And those safety labs really inform us that you are safe enough to participate in the trial. And these are very general labs that every clinical trial has. It's not specific just to our drug or our study. In fact, we have very few because of the mechanism of action of our drug, because it's gut restricted, gut mediated, and most of it's expelled through a fecal route. And so we don't anticipate a ton of systemic circulation of the drug, and we don't anticipate systemic effects. But we check liver, we check kidney, kind of the normal things that you would get checked for clinical trials. And if those look okay, then you move forward for baseline. Baseline, you have a few more labs done to confirm that nothing changed from the last time that you came in, because it could be up to 4 weeks from your screening visit to your baseline visit. Baseline visit means that's day 0 where you get your drug for the study, and then you start the next 12 weeks on this clinical trial.
In terms of some of that screening, so we have a very a more specific question here. So we have the Tempo trial in Australia at the moment as well. So one of our families is asking whether pitolisant would exclude them from the study, and if they stopped it, what the washout would be.
So if it's any investigational product or clinical trial, you can participate in both. And you can understand, because we really want to see true effect of the drug being studied. And if you have a variable that's thrown in there, that's another study drug that hasn't been approved, it's harder to understand what caused what effect, even if they have different reasons of being taken. So yes, if you're on investigational drug like pitolisant, excuse me, then it would be excluded, but it's a 1-month washout.
In terms of pitolisant, it's also a little interesting here because I know we have some families in Australia who are accessing it as part of standard of care, and some families who are presumably participating in the Tempo clinical trial. If they're accessing pitolisant as being a stable routine part of their care for a substantial or a period of time, does that still qualify as investigational? Or is that a conversation they need to pick up the phone and have a chat with you guys?
It would be a conversation. I think that if it is something that they're getting through a study, regardless of how long they've been on it, it's still considered investigational. If it's something that they are getting through insurance or through a medical facility, that's not under a study specifically. Like if they're an open label extension and they're getting that drug, that's still investigational. But if they're getting it as a prescription from their physician, that's not investigational. But I would say that questions like that, we'd be happy to talk directly with the sites as they come up.
Yep. So talk to your doctor. I think that sounds like good advice. A really important part of clinical trials, I think, is understanding some of the piece around informed consent. So if I pick up the phone and call, I want to have a conversation, I just want to know more. Can I say no after we've started that conversation?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can say no. And it's I think that's a really excellent point, Diane. I think that being interested doesn't mean you've signed. And even if you've signed, it doesn't mean you have to continue. And that's really important in all clinical trials. What you're doing for yourself is getting information and advocating for something for yourself or your family member. And getting information doesn't mean that you have to participate. It's just getting information. And if you are in the trial and you decide, I say this, and I run these clinical trials. But even if you're in the clinical trial and you decide, no, this isn't working out, that's okay too. And we actually walk you through that in our informed consent process. So you're very aware of your patient rights.
Excellent. That's really good. All right. I feel like I've missed a couple of questions, so I'm going to skim back down through here. Right, a bit of a curly one. So obviously we've recently had VICAD approved in the US, and that's not available to Australian populations as yet. So Aardvark runs the Hero trial runs for 12 weeks. You've got a year open label, 12-month open label extension off the end of that. Our families, I think, are going to be really interested to know at the end of all of that, if it's approved, will you be looking to come to Australia for approval down here as well?
100%.
Awesome.
We don't want to do trials to have it limited to certain countries. And that's really important foundationally for us as a company. I know Tian's going to probably say something on this as well, but it's very important that we don't want to just bring a trial to you. If we're going to bring a trial to you, we want to bring the medication to you. Excellent. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And I think, I mean, the caveat there, of course, for our families to keep in mind is that the FDA approval isn't TGA approval, which is our Australian equivalent, but yes. Awesome that is definitely the plan. Okay. Can you give us any anecdotal information about what the patients or the families observe functionally on the drug, please? So I talk about phase 2 because we are blinded, in fact, to phase 3. But phase 2, and I think Tian mentioned this a bit as well, that anecdotally we had reports of, I mean, I mentioned that decreased anxiety, but what does that look like for the families? And so we actually had someone who was playing video games. I think this is an anecdote that Tian knows well. Tian, maybe you can talk about it because he actually heard this.
Actually, there's more than one family that had this experience where, you know, in Prader-Willi, if lunch is 12 o'clock, then by 12:01, you know that something, you know, you'll know about it if it's not served on time. And in more than one family, it was like there was a distraction with a video game or some other game, and everyone forgot about mealtime. And then by mid-afternoon, I think the family was mortified that lunch wasn't served, but still no one had complained, especially the individual with Prader-Willi, which is something incredibly unexpected and not within the experience of those families. So that's one indicator. We had the multiple reports of individuals leaving food on the plate, and as you know, with very strict food restriction, you still expect those individuals to be voraciously eating the food that they're given. But having food on the plate was really something unexpected. And again, we even had an anecdote of a patient's the mischievous little sibling leaving out snacks and cookies to see whether truly his older sibling with Prader-Willi was really not hungry anymore. And it was like very very revealing and very shocking in a very positive manner to that family. So there's so many anecdotes like this that really together give us a lot of confidence that, you know, this is unlikely to be placebo driven, especially given the rapidity in which these were manifesting. And then there are other observations. As I mentioned before, you know, a lot of Prader-Willi individuals have a lot of inflammation and even rheumatic joint-like conditions. And there was one individual that really had difficulty even ambulating because of these joint pains that they had, but then on treatment went for daily walks, and you know, many stories like this that give us a lot of confidence. So and that's just the surface of some of the anecdotes that I can share.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
And we're
That's
we're very excited about these anecdotes, but again, I want to make sure they're anecdotes, which is why we're doing phase 3. It's a longer study. We hope to capture more of this with the data to support it. But that was very reassuring for us, and that's why we're doing our phase 3.
Yeah. Really nice stories to hear, right? Love a good mischievous sibling as well. So again, I'm just working my way back through to make sure I haven't missed any questions. So they're a little bit out of less in theme, shall we say. So can patients have access to the lab data that's specific to the trial? So the example they've given is ghrelin at baseline, for example.
Yeah, great question. So we aren't releasing that data. It's a blinded study, and so we're trying to limit how much information is dispersed. Certainly after the clinical trial, we'd be happy to think about how we could share data because it'd be important. It's just that when we have completed the trial, that's when everyone has finished and we can break the blind, if you will. Hopefully we can share all that.
I just want to share. I mean, just the discipline of keeping these data blinded. It's such to an extent that even I'm not aware of these data until the end of the study too. So it's not as if we have selectively, viewing this just to maintain the integrity of the study. We have to do these things.
Yeah.
So it might be worth, so for someone who's not at all familiar with clinical trial, what does that actually look like in a practical sense? Who can see what?
So, great question there as well. And so, in terms of blinding, so what happens in trials is you don't want the people running the trial, including the sponsor and at the site, to know too much information that could bias how they interpret the data ultimately. And so blinding means that certain practices within the trial are blinded, just that. So we don't see it, some certain data points, and that includes the primary endpoint. So you will take the hyperphagia questionnaire throughout the study. We don't see the data there, and it's because to help us not make assumptions, and it could change our behavior on how we run the trial. Same thing for the site level. They don't see those questionnaires data at all. They also don't see certain labs as well. We don't see it. They don't see it because it helps us stay neutral in our interpretation of the data when the last person completes the study. Again, it's really to ensure that there's integrity with how the data was processed, because you can understand that if we found out earlier, companies find out earlier, sites find out earlier, they're like, oh, that's working. And they may ask a question differently. We may interpret the data set differently. So it just keeps us from doing that, keeps the companies from doing that, and it keeps the sites from having any expectations as well.
And just to further elaborate, because just for someone not familiar with the terms, like for instance, single blinded is if, like for instance, the patients won't know who's getting placebo or active and so forth, and double blinded, not even the researchers and the principal investigators will be aware, and they have a way of mixing and matching so that no one knows exactly what they're on, just to maintain integrity of the trial. So that's what we're doing, a double blinded study.
Excellent. All right, fairly long question here. I'm just going to read it. It's hard to pre-screen this one. I was told by one clinician that the drug that my family's person with PWS was prescribed for another symptom would have to wait to be started, as no drug could be started 3 months before a trial. So that's, yeah. So if we did start, not drugs, it's not approved. All right, so I think that's really going to starting new medication before the trial. How long before the trial would they need to start a new medication before they would be eligible to join? And let's assume, so this is a prescribed medication.
Correct. So it's a nuance of clinical trials, honestly. So in terms of chronic medications or prescribed medications that you're going to be taking throughout the clinical trial itself that are allowed, we recommend 3 months. And the reason 3 months is because the dose changes and variability. You want to have a steady state reached, and it's just kind of a standard time frame that's used for clinical trials as you have a new medications that your body's getting used to. And so we're putting that 3-month period as a recommendation. And then for investigational drugs, it's 1 month only because it's not a chronic medication that you'll be taking throughout the study.
would that also apply to sort of routines, care? I'm thinking, changing school, leaving school, any major kind of predictable changes to management, whether they're lifestyle or medication. Is like the goal is to have somebody in a really routine, steady state before, while they're on the trial. Is that accurate, that it's not just prescription medications, but potentially any other major lifestyle interventions as well?
Well, if you're going to have any major changes during that time, we definitely want to keep it as routine as possible, but we're humans and events happen and things happen. So, that's why it's really important to have those conversations with the sites, and ensure that, if you're anticipating some travel, and you're already in the clinical trial, you need to inform the site because it changes the environment, and environments are really important to keep as consistent as possible. But again, you have lives. You're human, you're going to have things that happen and come up. It's just having that open communication and transparency so we can just document. Obviously, if you're going into the trial knowing this is going to happen, it's really important to have that conversation before you start the drug so they can plan ahead.
Excellent. Will my child continue on medication after their 12 weeks is over, or do they have to wait until the last participant finishes? How does the open label extension kick off?
Great question. And again, we would not want that. We wouldn't want a gap between when you're in the 12-week trial to the open label. So as soon as you complete the 12-week, and the requirement is to complete the 12-week, everyone goes straight into the OLE. As long as you choose to participate in the open label, you will immediately go into the open label. There shouldn't be a gap.
Excellent. In terms of the age limit on the trials, we've talked about it dropping from 13 down to 10 or possibly even 7. So thinking specifically here in Australia of the sites that we have running, I won't ask how far away that is. I'm instead going to ask what are the trigger points that for that change to happen. What needs to fall into place for that change for the age limit to drop?
Approval. It's
Right.
it's just regulatory approval. And we've been really careful about choosing the age groups because we want to have, you require certain preclinical supportive evidence in order to show that. And so we've done it methodically. And so it's just approvals and us making sure that the agencies are very aware of kind of our safety behind it, because as younger you go, they want to make sure it's a safe drug product to give to younger participants. And so it'll just be on approval, then we announce it, and then we immediately connect with the sites to see kind of because there's site-specific approvals that are also needed. So we try to do that as soon as we get the full regulatory approval. And then the turnaround time is just dependent based on the sites themselves.
So it's fair to say that the evidence and the safety profiles are in place to support dropping the age. It's just a matter of meeting the ethics and site-specific approval processes.
Correct.
Yeah, so not too far, but how long is a piece of string?
Yeah, we hope not too long. I mean, we have the alignment with the U.S. Regulatory agencies to drop to 10, and we assume that we're very optimistic that it's not too long in the future, but we don't want to forecast exact dates. But we're working hard at that. So all we can say is stay tuned, but we're actively trying to lower that age limit, daily.
Excellent. Well, that will be well received. Another question about the open label extension. Is there any reporting or I guess study visits? How is the open label extension phase monitored?
So there are study visits during that. It's much more spread out because it's over a year. But we want to ensure, part of the open label that generally are done is to not just give everybody the opportunity to get the active drug, but also for safety monitoring. And so by default, we have to kind of have a few visits that are spread out throughout that year. Some will be also telehealth, where we call or the sites will call you and just get some data points, but there'll be in-person visits as well, but they are spread out and to allow to get some of those collections that we may need, including lab work.
Excellent. All right. You indicated earlier that 2 of the 3 sites are up and running. Are you able to tell us which sites are actively recruiting today, shall we say?
Yes, yes. And again, I may actually just share this. 1 second. And I'll show you. Um,
Oh, did we just lose Fonzie? I think we might have.
Oh, I hopefully she can call right back in.
Here she comes. There we go. So, Tien, while we're waiting, there was also a question. So, you know, if I reach out to a site today to have that first conversation, and I like what I'm hearing, I'm stepping through, what would be kind of a typical time frame between those sort of early inquiries and being able to start in the trial?
I think the limiting factor is like that site itself. Oh, hi, I think Monsi's back on, but I think she's on mute. Is it? But yeah, but I think actually the timing is actually quite quick based on what I understand. But I'll kind of leave it to Monty for definitive answering here. Let me just tell you. Is it Monty's still on mute? I think maybe because she's being she's like a regular audience member because she cannot join via the video. Was the same link?
Yes, there we go.
I
there
am
she is.
back.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. If I don't kick myself out of a meeting once, then it's not even a real meeting, is it?
So I'm not
Right.
sure if you heard that question, Monty. Did you get the last question? That was what's the turnaround time between initial inbound inquiry if some family were to be interested today with the open sites?
So we have, so right now, I will tell you a model that we're using in the US, and we hope to use that also in Australia. But right now, it's a direct conversation with the sites. And obviously, our sites are amazing, especially the ones that we have in Australia, but they also have limited staff that can be involved in this. So I think that they would all want to move as many patients in as possible, as quickly as possible. But given that there's only a few per team per site, it could take a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month to just have the turnaround. So I would highly recommend the following right now. Is that if you are interested, so I'm showing you this, I think I'm showing you the screen if you can see the Australia map. And so the sites that are open right now are Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. Dr. Tanya Markovic is the PI there, and then the other one is Dr. Huesler's site, Queensland Children's Hospital. And then our next one that's anticipated, and if you go to the QR code that I showed earlier or clinicaltrials.gov and look up our study, the next one will be the Children's Hospital at Westmead. Dr. Cho is the principal investigator there. That's up next. But the first two, Brisbane and Sydney, are the ones that are open. And actually, why don't I just share this. Here you go. So that'll help whoever's interested to go directly to our clinicaltrials.gov. So that is the turnaround, and it may be more or less, but again, it's all site dependent. The other, and again, I wish I could send more people there for them, but they are doing as much as they can. They're amazing, and we are so excited to work with them, but it's going to take them a little bit of time because there is quite a bit of interest. So if you're, I would say contact soon just so you get on the list. And then the other piece is that we have a service that we've been using that we hope to use in Australia, and we'll update the community as soon as we know. It's called Leap Cure. It's a concierge service to actually help families who are interested and help them guide them to the sites that are open and limit that turnaround time. They essentially do all the work in between before you get seen at the site. And so hopefully we'll have that available for all of you soon in Australia.
That's awesome. We have a comment from a family here who's obviously already reached out. They've said that Queensland was about 2 to 3 weeks to organise travel to suit the family. So I guess that there'll be variability, but that's good feedback to have as well. I think final question for this morning, because gosh, we've given you a grilling. Thank you so much. My final question, I think it's really important with clinical trials that we have real buy-in and engagement with the person with Prader-Willi syndrome themselves. I don't know if we have anyone online today or if we're mostly talking with families. But I'd be really curious to know whether you have trial information, protocol information, informed consent information in accessible or easy read type formats, in order to make sure that we also have sort of open conversations directly with the person who's going to be affected and engaged in the trial as well.
Yes, absolutely. So great question. And again, I'm a pediatric endocrinologist, so I hear you, and I think that's ultimately essential. And so part of when you go in for these meetings and the appointments that you will have, there's an assent process. So it's for the participants based on their age and conceptual understanding that we have certain material available. And so the sites will have that, and then based on the requirements for your family member, we'll have that available. And I couldn't agree more that it has to be accessible and understandable for all age levels and understanding.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Are there any last points or comments that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I think it's just gratitude. Ultimately, this is a protocol that's just pen to paper, but it comes to real life, and we can get this across to so many families because of the groups that we get to collaborate with, the families and their children and the participants. And it's an entire community that makes this go forward. So again, we're just really grateful that we get to come and bring this to fruition. So thank you so much for having us and allowing us to speak about it, but also helping us bring this to families.
I want to also echo that. I was just really grateful for the opportunity, and I know the families are entrusting us, and we feel very confident and assured that we're presenting a program that we very much believe in. So we're very much looking forward to the conduct and completion of this trial, and I think our whole team is very, very motivated, knowing the potential impact of an effective agent here.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time this morning, and for the huge barrage of questions that I think have all been really interesting and help our families, I think, to understand where this trial sits for them. I think in closing, I'm going to see if I can run
Diane,
through these.
Whilst you're jumping to your slide, I just wanted to add my thanks to Tian and Monsi for taking the time to talk to our families. We've had a previous Q&A, and it's so interesting to see how the conversation is really progressing as the trial is now open for recruitment. Thank you so much for all of your effort and investment and your hard work to innovate in a treatment that will hopefully change lives of people with Prader-Willi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. It's just a final reminder as we close that it's really important for families to weigh up all this information. Not every trial will suit every family. We present these webinars, these partnerships with companies for education and opportunity. So have those conversations, pick up the phone. You can say no if it's not the right trial for you. But it is through clinical trials that we will progress discoveries in the lab all the way through to clinical treatments that can have a meaningful impact on life. So that's just as I say, ask lots of questions. There are a number of clinical trials that are running in Australia. The HERO trial there on the top line is the one that we've talked about today. But there are lots of opportunities. They all have a very different focus. Some are surveys, some are, Lauren Rice, for example, is doing brain imaging. Some are commonly available medications now, like tirzepatide. Others are investigational, but they all form a really important role in advancing and accelerating therapeutic options for the kids with PWS, for our families. So keep asking those questions, find trials that are the right fit. let's work together and get these trials through, and hopefully see more therapies for our families. So there, as a closeout screen, just some additional contact points for further information, and a final thanks to Aardvark, to Dr. Lee and Dr. Jamin for joining us this morning, and families for coming along, hearing more, and asking such amazing questions. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.